So please give Abi your attention.
Sure.
I was raised as a Protestant. I was raised in the Methodist Church, and my family is very devout. We went to church every Sunday. We did everything that happened at the church, all the events. My parents raised us to love God and to know God. They based their parenting on the Bible. So, we had the Golden Rule and Ten Commandments and everything. We were expected to act according to our faith and everything we did. So that was my background. I grew up, I would say from a young age, just having a gift of faith. I always loved God. I remember being in the car on like a family trip, and we were listening to oldies music, and on the radio the announcer was like, "It's the King's birthday," talking about Elvis. And I was like, "It's not Christmas. Like, what did he say? It's the King's birthday." And I got all offended. So I just had this like kind of wacky love for God. And growing up, I was definitely like a goody two shoes, follow the rules, get perfect grades, blah blah blah. And so I didn't really like struggle with a lot of things that teenagers sometimes struggle with. I went to an all-girls boarding school, so there were no boys to distract me. I was very anti-boy. I was like, "You're gross." That was my approach. That was my approach to boys in high school. And in college, I was like the leader of my youth ministry thing that I went to. I was really involved. I went to church in college too, which a lot of people don't do. And all my friends were Christian. We all shared that. Like, I sought out people who shared my faith. And so my plan for life was that I was going to be a missionary. I was going to go to the ends of the earth and share the gospel and basically like save the world. That was what I was going to do. That was what I felt God wanted me to do. So part of that was that I was a French major, so that I could go to like a French-speaking place in Africa and hold babies and make them better. I also took Russian in college so that I, had more options. For some reason, I never learned Spanish. That's still haunting me. So, yeah, that was my plan. That was where I was going in life. So when I graduated, I studied education because I felt like I needed to have a practical skill to offer in a mission field. So I was like, okay, I'll be a teacher. And so I decided I wanted to get experience before I went abroad, because I felt like, how am I going to go and be a teacher if I've never actually taught? Like, I think it'll be hard enough to do ministry. So that's what I decided to do. So I applied for all these different jobs, and it came down to like 3 options. One of them was I was going to go to France and live there for a year and teach English. It's a program that the French government does, because everybody in France has to take English class. And so that was one thing I was considering. That was like my top choice. That was what I wanted to do, because I wanted to like get out of America. Not because I hate America, but I just like always wanted to travel and stuff. The other option was that I actually worked in a restaurant in Blacksburg. It was a really cool like organic restaurant, and I was trying to be all trendy and hip and like learn about the local food movement, blah blah blah. So I was doing that like while I was still considering what to do. And then my third option was I applied with the teaching agency and decided to apply for this job at Fredericksburg Academy, because the only reason, I told my small group, the only reason I even applied for the job or did an interview is because I'm horrible at interviews. Like, I'm just terrible. And so I was like, the only way I'm going to get better at interviews is if I try and like just put myself out there. So the only reason I did that interview was to like practice. I was not actually interested in teaching in America. options. I didn't know what to do. Finally, I decided to stay in Blacksburg because my sister and brother went to Tech. Even though I went to UVA. It was okay, I still love them. And I was living there with my brother and sister, and I decided to stay with them and keep working in the restaurant I was in. Well, then that didn't really work out. It just kind of like flopped. I had never worked in a restaurant before, and I was supposed to be the manager, and it just like didn't work out. The lady who was opening this restaurant really didn't know. She had never worked in a restaurant either, so it was just kind of a disaster. So I was trying to get out of that situation, and so out of desperation, I reactivated my application, and FA still hadn't hired a French teacher like 3 months later. So the lady at the teaching agency, she was like, yeah, they still want you to teach her. I was like, yes, please, full-time job benefits, yes, like I'll do it. And so my plan was that I would just go and teach for 2 years in Fredericksburg, so I'd get my experience, and then, go out and save the world. So that was still my plan. But before I moved to Fredericksburg, I went to a wedding in Charlottesville. It was one of my housemates from college. She was getting married, so it was in July. It was super hot. And I'm sitting there waiting for the wedding to begin, and like you could tell, like it gets quiet, like the bride's about to come down the aisle, and then I see this like big guy walking down the aisle. He sits down in front of me. See this late, and like he always is. So yeah. So I was like, oh, I know that guy, and actually we knew each other in high school. He went to an all-boys school. So, like, we would hang out because he would go visit my friend's sister, and so we would all just, like, hang out. But as I said, I was very anti-boy in college. I was like, no. So, I don't think he actually remembers me. He says he did. But, so at the wedding, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go talk to him because I was third wheeling with my best friend and her boyfriend, who's now her husband. So I just didn't want to be, like, hanging out with them the whole time during the reception. So I was like, okay, I'll go talk to him. So I come up to Jorge and I'm like, who are we going to reenact? I'm like, hi Jorge, I'm Abby. Do you remember me?
Oh! No, you said Jorge. I was like, and you're like, Abby. I was like, Abby.
Yeah, that's what it was. I was like, yeah, I'm Abby's friend. He was like, oh yeah. So we just started talking. And I was like, yeah, I took this job in Fredericksburg. I don't know anyone there. And he was like, his eyes lit up, and he was like, oh, that's where I'm from. So I can like show you the ropes, introduce you to people. And I was like, okay. He's like, let me get your number. He like kept following me around the whole way.
Don't forget the whole falling around thing. That's the key word. So I was a cradle Catholic in Hispanic family, very close, very religious, very spiritual, but also very, hey mom, why do we do this? Don't ask questions. Just do as I said. I'll eat Jesus. Cool. I'll go talk to the priest and be like, yeah, I said a bad word to my sister, whatever. So, growing up, my brother was a big influence on me. He's 5 years older than me. He went to a party college. While I was in high school, I'd always go with him. So, I'd party with him, and I thought my brother was the best thing ever, so I wanted to be like him. We were very different, though. I was always an okay child. I always did what my parents told me to do. And I had to choose between when I went to college to go to his college, which I applied to. I was like, of course I want to go there. Or William & Mary, which is like, not really a party college. Everybody there wants to study, right? So I was like, well, make my parents proud, I guess, because they're paying for my education. So I went to William & Mary, made really no friends at all. And I think I brought the GPA down, the SAT score down. But anyway, so then I met this girl that took me down a lifestyle that is the opposite, complete opposite of the way that Christ wants me to take. And we split up, 2 different times, and then after the second time, I was like, this is not how I want to start my family. I can't start with a woman like this. If she just prioritizes herself and I'm prioritizing myself, there's no us. There's only me. So I wanted to do a 180. I applied to pastry school in Chicago. My plan was to go to Chicago to the French culinary school and learn pastry, and then go get my master's in chocolate in Switzerland, and then come back to Fredericksburg and open a chocolate shop. And so I was on the way there. I applied, I got accepted. I went to Duke Medical, which is a program to help find a healthier lifestyle. I was losing some weight, and I was just like, all right, my life is changing, this is the way I need to go. My faith was still just kind of like, whatever, like, whenever I can fit it in. And then that summer, right before I left to Chicago, or was going to leave Chicago, I went to a wedding in Charlottesville. And I just showed up. I was like, my buddy, my roommate from high school, yo, Kelly, shh. Oh, I sat down. And so we went to the reception. It was hot. And I was like, I sweat. It's like freezing. And I'm like, so I'm trying to look for air conditioning. I'm like, and then I hear, hi! And I'm like, oh, hey. And so she says I was following her around. She's like, you want to go get some crab cakes? I'm like, yeah, let's go get some crab cakes. So we go get crab cakes. And she's like piling on like 2 different plates. I'm like, yeah, this girl can eat. And then all of a sudden she goes, quote unquote, I swear, she goes, can you hold these? I don't want to look like a piggy. So I then commenced to follow her to the table. And she's like, alright, go ahead. And then she was like, oh yeah, I got a job in Fredericksburg. And then she's like, I don't even know why I got invited to this wedding. Like, the bride doesn't even like me. I was like, why? And she's like, because she complains because I'm always cleaning. I'm like, so I was like, hey, just let's hook up. I'll show you around Fredericksburg, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I moved to Fredericksburg. And, like, my parents moved me in, even though Jorge offered to move me in. I think he was sort of offended that I didn't call him, like, the moment I arrived. But I did call him, and we hung out. And then, so I should say that my plan in life to be a missionary did not include being married. Like, I felt called to singleness. So I was like, I just want to have my life, be able to go wherever I want to go, like, do whatever God wants me to do. Like, a husband is going to get in the way. So that was how I was with guys. Like, I never dated anyone. I dated, like, one guy in college for, like, 2 months. And I was like, no. So that was just my approach. But when Jorge and I started hanging out, I don't know,
Well, let me take over from there.
he didn't charm me.
Anyway, so we got past the whole dating thing, which was really cute. We can tell you about that later. But I one day said to Abby, I was like, Abby, how can I love you more? And
After we've been dating.
she looked at me and she said, I was expecting like, take me to dinner, take me to the mountains.
Maybe strawberries.
She goes, if you want to love me more, I want you to spend more time at the church. I want you to volunteer your time to the church. I was like, wow. I wasn't expecting that. So when I did that, I called St. Mary and I was like, hey, I want to volunteer. What do I do? And then Mary Fitch was like, oh, there's some Micah ministry dinners at the basement of the Episcopalian church. I was like, cool, I'll be there. I went there, and there was this guy standing there, and people were like, hey, Lou! I was just like, who's this guy? And then someone was like, Leo! I was like, Leo? And then all of a sudden, I pictured Aslan from Lion King. I don't know if he knows this, but... And so I was like, cool name. I go up, I'm like, hey, Leo, what's up? I'm Jorge. He's like, oh, Jorge. Oh, muy bien. Jesus, blah, blah, blah. And then we just kicked it off. And he's like, you need to join youth group. So take it from there.
When Jorge and I started dating, we had lots of theological debates. So I was like hardcore Protestant. Like, I knew the truth. He didn't. So I was kind of and I feel like he probably had the same idea, although not as hoity-toity as I was about it. So we went to church together. On Sundays, we would go to my church, which was like a 2-hour service. And then we would go to Mass together.
Every Sunday.
For how many years? For like a year. So we did that, and we would, of course, have theological debates about the differences, the main differences between Catholicism and Protestantism. The biggest one being, well, the biggest two being, like, the authority of Scripture, and, like, if it's not in the Bible, it's not true. That was my stance on it, sola scriptura, which isn't even in the Bible, but I didn't know that. And then Mary, like Jorge would show me stuff in the catechism about Mary, and I'd be like, that's not valid. That's not in the Bible. So we would have all these debates and everything.
Very friendly debates.
Yeah, we weren't like fighting, we were just being like, oh, that we don't agree on this.
And then all the while I was volunteering for youth group, God called me to the sacrament of reconciliation. It was heavy in my heart that in order to give to you guys, I had to prepare myself for whatever the church needed from me. I wanted to tell the church, I wanted to confess to the church every demon that I had ever experienced. From when you're like 3 years old, you don't even know what things are, whether it was right or wrong. And I had about an hour and a half confession with Father Bresnahan. And after about an hour of crying, literally, I looked up at him expecting him to be like, and so I looked up and I'm like, I'm done, Father. He goes, oh really? That's it? I was like, woo! He's like, dude, that was awesome! And he's like, dude, because of your obedience to God and you were able to just lay everything down and say that you weren't worthy to be a volunteer makes you the most capable volunteer because you're willing to sacrifice everything because you want to help them. You want to help them in a clean fashion. And you know what? They have experiences, you have experiences, and they can learn from it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so, anyway, that life confession just completely allowed me to enter the Eucharist and allowed me to enter my relationship with Abby in a very, I didn't have that backpack full of stuff anymore. I was like, all right, ready to go. So, and then I invited her to youth group.
So I had been involved, a leader for youth group in the church that I went to when I was in Blacksburg, and I enjoyed it. So he was like, yeah, I'm doing youth group now with Leah. I was like, oh, cool. So even though I wasn't Catholic, they let me come in.
To just sit down.
Yeah. So the topic for the night was the Eucharist. And like I said, that's like the biggest difference between Catholicism and Protestantism, because Protestants believe it's just a symbol, like that it doesn't actually become the body and blood of Christ. And so I was like, oh great, here we go, these crazy Catholics, they're going to be talking about creepy things. And Leo shows these videos of miracles where the host started bleeding and stuff like that. I'm like, that is so photoshopped. And in his talk, Leo, we talked about John 6. Which was actually, in my Bible study at my church, we were studying the book of John, and we had just read that chapter that week. So Leo points out that when Jesus is talking about the Eucharist, he's like, and truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. And Leo told us that, the word that he uses for eat is not
what's the word?
A symbolic word.
Trogos.
And Yeah,
Means
so,
to gnaw.
yeah, it's like a very descriptive word, which means like gnaw with your teeth, like chew. And everybody who's listening to Jesus is freaking out. They're like, what are you saying? That's disgusting. Like, we don't want to eat you. And people who were following him,
The multitudes.
and the multitudes just left. They were like, okay, this is too much. This guy's crazy. And even Peter said to Jesus, like, Lord, this is a hard teaching. What are you saying? And Leah pointed out, like, at that point, when all these people are leaving and his disciples are questioning him, if it was a symbol, don't you think Jesus would have said, like,
Whoa! Hey, come back!
like,
Dude, this is just a symbol!
just a symbol, I don't really want you to eat me, don't worry about it. But he repeats himself like 3 times. He's like, truly, truly, I say to you, if you want to be my follower, this is what you have to do. And so, after the talk, like, we went into small groups, and we're talking, I wasn't allowed to be there, I was just listening. But I was like, in the back of my mind, like, whoa, what am I going to do about this? Because this is obviously true. How did I never, like, realize this before? And I can't, like, ignore what I know now. Like, I have the knowledge now. I can't pretend that it's not there. I can't pretend that the Eucharist in the Catholic Church isn't real. So from that point, I decided that I had to actually explore becoming Catholic. Even after going to Mass for like a year, I would always just, like, sit there and be respectful and, go through the motions, but I never went up for communion or anything. So I decided to take the RCIA class. And through a lot of prayer and discussion and thought, I decided to become Catholic. The things that I love most about the faith that I didn't know before I took RCIA or really explored the faith are reconciliation. Like, as a Protestant, like, you just talk to God and you're like, I'm sorry, God, and you just, like, know that He forgives you. But it's so powerful to actually say it to someone else who's acting in persona Christi to forgive you, like, with actual words. I can't explain, like, how amazing that is if you don't have that privilege. Like, as Catholics, we should think of that as a privilege because other people who are Christians never get that feeling of reassurance that's so concrete and physical. And the other thing is the tradition of the church. That was something that I, would have rejected as a Protestant. If it's not in the Bible, it's not true. Like, the Pope, who cares? He's just another guy. The teachings about Mary, they're not in the Bible, so they're not true. But now I've come to understand that the tradition of the church is just as valid as Scripture. Both together are what make up our faith. And it's something that is just beautiful, that God has preserved the church through thousands of years, through hardships, through crazy things that have happened, through the Reformation, when so many people in Europe left the church. Actually, in South America and in Central America, he was working in crazy ways to bring people to the Catholic faith. So those were just some of the reasons I decided to convert. And the biggest changes made in my life is that, my plan was to go and live abroad. My plan was to have this adventurous life and never get married. And obviously that didn't work out. But God has shown me that, and Jorge has shown me that your mission field is where you are. It's great if you feel called, it's awesome to go abroad. It's awesome to serve people in the corners of the earth, and we're also called to do that, but you can't ignore where you are. And it's just been amazing how God has changed my heart to see that the family is the most important mission field we have. And I guess I could go into how now the rest of my family is Protestant, and that's still
So, and fast forward to, we have a 13-month-old, and we have one on the way. I'm very thankful.